Bristol, Tennessee City Council meeting of May 3rd, 2022. Mary Lee, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Powers? Here. Luttrell?
Here.
Turner?
Here.
Robin?
Here.
Patton?
Here. I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Your interest in city government is appreciated. There are a number of opportunities to speak on matters of city business this evening. A sheet explaining those opportunities has been made available to you when entering the meeting room. As we go forward with tonight's agenda, I will note each time when public comment is welcome. In addition, a sign-up sheet has been provided as you enter the council chambers for those individuals desiring to address City Council during the Appearance of Citizens section of our agenda. Tonight, I would like to ask Dr. Chris Aaron, Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church, to lead us in our invocation. And following the invocation, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Aaron?
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we thank you that we live in a country, that we live in a community where citizens elect their representatives. We thank you that we live in a place where all of your children not only have a voice, but that we have the freedom to exercise it at the ballot box. As we look around the globe, we see how increasingly rare that is. We see the rise of anti-democratic authoritarian forces that seek to stomp out dissent and freedom, that seek to deny rights to minorities and the poor, that seek to enslave those who long to be free. And that terrifying rise of evil reminds us of how precious what we have truly is. It reminds us that it is worth defending, that it is worth engaging in and supporting, that it is worth doing the long, slow, and laborious work to make democracy function and thrive. Lord, that is what these people are doing here tonight. So I ask that you bless them and their efforts. I ask that you bless this council and the work that they do on behalf of their constituents, the people of this community. Allow them not to heed the calls of cynicism. Instead, remind them of the responsibility and the privilege that they have. Local communities, local city council meetings, local school board meetings, these serve as the laboratories and building blocks of our democracy. So remind these officials of the importance of their work. Remind them that they are to work not for their own good, but for the good of all who call Bristol home. Remind them that they are called to be servants, and allow those reminders to inspire them. Cultivate in them a sense of creativity, renew in them the role of responsibility, and alight again in them the virtues of transparency, service, and love. For it is in Christ's name that we pray. Amen.
Tonight we have 7 proclamations on tonight's agenda, and I'll read the first one, Proclamation, Drinking Water Week. And I'd like to ask Mark Quickle to come up to the podium, please. May 1 through May the 7th, 2022 is designated as Drinking Water Week. We have Mr. Mark Quickle, our plant superintendent, with us this evening to accept the proclamation. Whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas drinking water serves as a vital role in daily life, serving an essential purpose to health, hydration, and hygiene needs for the quality of life of our citizens to enjoy. And whereas tap water delivers public health protection, fire protection, support for our economy, and the quality of life we enjoy. And whereas the hard work performed by the entire water sector, designing capital projects, operators ensuring the safety and quality of drinking water, or a member of the pipe crew maintaining the infrastructure communities rely on to support and transport high-quality drinking water from its source to our consumers' taps. Whereas the coronavirus pandemic has shone a light on the importance of drinking water for health, hydration, and hygienic needs. And whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which current and future generations depend. And whereas the citizens of our city are called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, practice water conservation, and get involved with their water by familiarizing themselves with it. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Mayor of the City of Bristol, Tennessee, does hereby claim May 1 through 7, 2022 as Drinking Water Week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd like to, as a representative of the water plant and utilities, we'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, distinguished council, and Mr. Sora for your continued support. And we'd like to state that we will continue to strive to produce and deliver a high-quality drinking water to all our customers, consecutive systems that you all expect, and that we have set a high standard for ourselves and hope to continue that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation designating the week of May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as National Emergency Medical Services Week. Councilman Hutton will read the proclamation. We have with us Captain Darnell Mears of the Bristol, Tennessee Fire Department to accept the proclamation.
Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical service teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical service teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical service providers by designated Emergency Medical Services Week, now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor of Bristol, Tennessee proclaims May 15th through 21st, 2022 as Emergency Medical Services Week, with the theme EMS Week, Rising to the Challenge. I encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities.
Mayor Luttrell and the distinguished council, on behalf of the men and women of Bristol, Tennessee Fire Department, we greatly want to appreciate the giving us this proclamation for this week of May 15th through the 21st. I really do appreciate it. I think the people in this room know what kind of service the fire department provides for our community. If you don't know, I encourage you to come to the fire department and see what the fire service provides. Bar none, we have the best EMS service within the state. I guarantee that. We work really hard, provide the service, care for the community, care for the visitors within the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and we return every day to do it. So thank you ever so much for Proclamation. Really appreciate it. And again, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation designating the week of May 9th through the 13th, 2022 as Economic Development Week. I would like to ask Vice Mayor Vince Turner to read the proclamation. And we have with us Matt Garland, the City Economic Development Specialist, with us this evening to accept the proclamation.
And April Eads is here too. April Eads is here too.
We have others, April Eads is in the audience as well, so yeah, we'd like to have her step up there as well. And I can't see, but and anyone else, Michael Parker, Tom, bring them all, more the merrier.
Whereas economic developers promote economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating, retaining, and expanding jobs that facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base. And whereas economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurism in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is the hallmark of American economy. And whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural, urban, local, state, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, and a variety of other institutions. And whereas economic developers assist our existing industries and businesses, which are the cornerstone of our local economy, to continue to thrive and grow. And whereas the Industrial Development Board works alongside and in support of the city's economic development team, providing diverse experience, expertise, and leadership. And whereas the economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions. And whereas the economic development team is valued and has the admiration and appreciation for the work they do in the city of Bristol, Tennessee. And therefore it be resolved that the mayor of the city of Bristol, Tennessee does hereby proclaim May 9th through the 13th, 2022 as Economic Development Week, and reminds individuals of the importance of this community celebration, which supports expanding career opportunities and making lives better.
And while they're having their picture made, I'm more than happy to say this team right here is just doing great things for Bristol.
Councilwoman Powers, can I interrupt? Wait, but don't take that picture yet. Can we add the community relations to that team also?
Yes.
John Luttrell, and you're going to talk about our phenomenal team, so take it.
Well, what you see before you is we have several certified economic development specialists standing before you. In Sullivan County, we have 5 certified economic developers, the most between here and Knoxville easily. In Sullivan County specifically, we have 3 of those, 2 of those in Bristol. It is a team. We've got community relations, we've got our Department of Economic Development, and we have Sullivan Networks Partnership represented tonight, and we have BTES. And this is a team that is in constant contact with the surrounding area, as well as with the governor's office and the Tennessee ECD. And so we are very, very, very blessed to have these good folks to be on our team. And in the coming weeks and months, I think you're going to see a lot of their work come to fruition and will benefit our total community. So having said that, Matt, thank you. Tom, April, John, Michael, thank you to all of you.
You just stole all my thunder.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Swore, thank you very much for recognizing us. Throughout the past few years that I've been associated with the City of Bristol, we've had a lot of success in economic development, and I think you'll see a lot more coming. The train is in motion, and we are moving forward to see this community grow. Economic development kind of encompasses a lot of different things and a lot of different avenues and aspects, and we're working on each of those. So I'm excited to say that we have several announcements that will be forthcoming. I brought my friends along because we can't do it. We can't do it without them. You got Michael Parker from Networks, April Leeds from Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services, John Luttrell with the Department of Communications, and Tom and I work together in the city's Economic Development Department. Lynn Tully sends her regrets. She's our state liaison for our Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. But I think we have a fantastic team, and we are very proud to do what we do and represent the city of Bristol well. Again, thank you for this, and thank you for recognizing economic development, and we look forward to having some great news for you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just also add to what Councilwoman Powers said? I think sometimes it's really hard for all of us to understand economic development and what a challenge it is and what the competition is, and that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that sometimes we don't win, but that's not because we aren't doing a good job. It's because whatever reason, whatever company or effort found some reason somewhere else that worked just as hard as we did, and it just was a better fit from what they could tell. But it is a tough field, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of nurturing relationships, and those are some of the reasons why we need a team and also why we feel like we do a good job. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Matt.
Okay. We'll move into another area. It's kind of like economic development, but anyway, next we have a proclamation designating the week of May 1 through May 7th, 2022 as National Travel and Tourism Week. I would like to ask Councilwoman Powers to read the proclamation. We have with us Mr. Matt Bolas, our Executive Director of Explore Bristol, this evening to accept the proclamation. And the one that really does all the work is to his right, John. But we'll let Matt take some credit here, though.
And I would encourage everyone to go to your social media and be sure and like and follow Explore Bristol. It's the digital work that they're doing with that and pushing Bristol out, not only in our area, but across the region and across the country, quite honestly. Their data points are just beyond outstanding. Whereas the future of travel will be a consistent driver of Bristol's economy and workforce, we know that a robust travel industry provides significant economic benefits for the nation, generating more than $2.6 trillion in economic output prior to the pandemic, and with $1.2 trillion spent directly by travelers in the U.S. Whereas travel has been the foundation of a healthy workforce, serving as one of the largest private sector employers in the U.S., supporting 17 million jobs prior to the pandemic. And whereas spending by travelers has aided state and local governments alike, generating $90 billion in state and local tax revenue prior to the pandemic to support essential services and programs, I just have to say, we're coming back with a vengeance in Bristol. We have the pre-pandemic numbers, but our post-pandemic numbers are stacking up excellently. Whereas tourism is the second largest industry in Tennessee, generating an economic impact of more than $16.8 billion in travel expenditures in 2020 alone. And whereas Sullivan County is ranked 10th out of 95 counties in Tennessee in economic impact from travel in 2020, generating nearly $407 million in direct tourism expenditures and supporting 3,605 jobs. The travel industry cannot recover without the full return of in-person meetings and events by both domestic and international visitors, and we are seeing both here in our community. Whereas the rebound of travel will drive the rebuilding of the U.S. economy and American workforce, since prior to the pandemic, 60% of leisure and hospitality employment was small business. And whereas the future of travel will prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, powering a future that values all cultures, embraces new perspectives, and reflects the faces and ideas of the full American society. And whereas the future of travel will foster a faster recovery, create a more substantial, seamless, and secure traveler experience, and rebuild Bristol's workforce, driving us toward a more prosperous future. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor of Bristol, Tennessee, Madeline Luttrell, does hereby proclaim May 1st through 7th, 2022 as National Travel and Tourism Week in Bristol, and urges the citizens of Bristol to join in recognizing the critical role that this industry plays in our community. This on the third day of May, 2022.
Just want to take a moment to thank you, Mayor, thank you, Council, and City staff. I do want to emphasize how important tourism is to our community. We see from the pandemic of how tourism affected our community. And the one positive that I can definitely point out is how we've rebounded so quickly. We do have assets from across all of our region, but we are so fortunate here in Bristol to have incredible NASCAR racing, incredible country music heritage, from trails, hiking, lakes. I could go on and on. Sometimes we overlook the impact of those attractions and entities. Our downtown, the Pinnacle, they bring in millions of visitors a year. That economic impact improves our quality of life, it helps our school, our city services. So I just want to say thank you. The tourism industry is a passionate industry, and I would like to say thanks to the city and city staff and all the community, because when we have events in Bristol, we do it right. Everyone steps up, everyone volunteers, and we can see the impact that it has on our community. So we appreciate you acknowledging and giving us this recognition for National Tourism Week, and just continue to explore Bristol. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation designating the week of May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as National Police Week. May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officers Memorial Day. I would like to ask Councilwoman Fire Robin to read this proclamation. And Captain Justin Bush is here to accept this proclamation. Captain, if he's there.
Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Bristol, Tennessee Police Department. Whereas there were 58,170 assaults against law enforcement officers in 2019, resulting in approximately 17,560 injuries. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas 619 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 472, of which 319 are COVID-related, officers killed in 2021, and 147 officers died in previous years, but whose stories of sacrifice had been lost to history until now. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 33rd Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2022. Whereas the Candlelight Vigil is part of the events for National Police Week, which takes place this year, May 15 through 21. Whereas May 15 this year is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-mast. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor of the City of Bristol, Tennessee, formally designates May 15 through 21, 2022 as Police Week, and May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in the city of Bristol, Tennessee, and publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation this 3rd day of May, 2022.
Good evening. This year alone, there have been 101 law enforcement line of duty deaths, to include the men and women across this great nation. I want to first thank the citizens of Bristol for their continued support, the city council, city manager, and all the other city staff for recognizing May 15th through the 21st of this year for all of those fallen officers. And their continued support. The men and women of the Bristol, Tennessee Police Department get up every day, put this uniform on, go out, not knowing if they're going to come home to their families, and they do it so willingly. So again, thank you for your support for this proclamation.
Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation designating the week of May 15th through 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week. I would like to ask Vice Mayor Turner to read this proclamation. And Mr. Russell Whitaker will be in attendance to accept the proclamation.
Thank you. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Bristol, Tennessee. And whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works officials, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in Bristol, Tennessee to gain knowledge of and to maintain ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. Whereas the year 2022 marks the 62nd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor of Bristol, Tennessee proclaims May 15th through the 21st as National Public Works Week. All citizens are urged to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protect our national health, safety, and quality of life.
On behalf of all the men and women in public services, I'd like to thank the mayor, council, and Mr. Sora for this proclamation. Our Department of Public Services is made up of a dedicated group of individuals who are professional at their job and work hard every day to help the citizens and make Bristol a great place to live. Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation designating May the 5th, 2022 as Children's Mental Health Acceptance Day. I would like to ask Councilwoman Robin to read this proclamation, and Ms. Heather Barnum Care Coordinator with Tennessee Voices, is here tonight to accept the proclamation.
Whereas, addressing the complex mental health needs of children, youth, young adults, and families today is fundamental to the citizens of Bristol, Tennessee. And whereas the need for comprehensive, coordinated mental health services for children, youth, young adults, and families places upon our community a critical responsibility. And whereas it is appropriate that a day should be set apart each year for the direction of our thoughts toward our children's mental health and well-being. And whereas Tennessee Voices, through its unique approach to serving children and adolescents, is effectively caring for the mental health needs of children, youth, young adults, and families in our community. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Mayor of the City of Bristol, Tennessee, does hereby proclaim May 5th, 2022 as Children's Mental Health Acceptance Day in the City of Bristol, Tennessee, and urge all our citizens and all agencies and organizations interested in meeting every child's mental health need to unite on that day in the observance of such exercise as will acquaint the people of our community with the fundamental necessity of a year-round program for children, youth, and young adults with mental health needs and their families, this third day of May 2022.
I just want to say thank you to Latrell and all the council people for electing this day for children's mental health, and it's very important to me as a mom of children with mental health issues to have this honor to be able to have this week for Acceptance Week, and Tennessee Voices is very adamant about getting the acceptance of mental health out into the community, so I thank you all.
We have no presentations on tonight's agenda, so we'll move to public hearings. We have 3 public hearings on tonight's agenda. The public hearing is hereby open for Ordinance 22-2, amending Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates application procedures for special use permits. Mr. Sore, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, I'd be glad to. Ordinance 22-2 does amend Section 217, Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance to prohibit an applicant of a denied special use permit from reapplying for a special use permit on the same project on the same location for a period of 180 days. As council's aware, you approved this on first reading during your April 5th meeting. This matter was then referred to the Planning Commission. They voted by a 7-1 vote to forward a positive recommendation on the ordinance, but they did have a request that the 180-day period be reduced to 90 days. We also have Sheriff Young, our Director of Community Development and Planning, here with us this evening that can further detail this request.
Thank you, Mr. Sora. Good evening, Mayor Luttrell, City Council members. So that was an excellent overview of the ordinance to date. And what I have to present to you tonight is what came out of the Planning Commission meeting this past month. And that is the language that's on the screen that says if an application for a special use permit is denied, the applicant may not submit a new application for a special use permit for the same project on the same property until the passage of 90 days from the date of the denial and the original special use permit. So that is a revision that's just in yellow from the 180 days that was read at first reading to 90 days, which is the recommendation by the Planning Commission. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Would anyone in the audience like to address the council on this matter? Okay, seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. Next, public hearing open for Ordinance 22-3, amending Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of the city's zoning ordinance as they relate to storage unit facilities. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor. As council is aware, the city zoning ordinance currently allows storage units to be constructed in a B3 commercial district, providing a special use permit has been issued by the Planning Commission. Ordinance 22-3 would amend Chapter 4 that would remove the special use permit provisions from the B3 zone, and Chapter 5 would be amended to reflect that a storage facility could be permitted in an M1 or M2 district by right, not a special use permit. The council approved this on first reading during your April 5th meeting. The Planning Commission did review this matter as a matter of practice between the two readings at their April 8th, 10th meeting. Motion was made to send a favorable recommendation to City Council on the ordinance as written, but the motion did not pass. It had a 4-4 vote. Sheriff, would you like to detail council on any additional aspects of this?
Yes, sir. Well, that was an excellent intro again. I'll just summarize that the proposed language here is to delete the warehouses item from Chapter 4 in the B3 district. So delete that as a item of consideration under the special use permit, and then to add warehouses as a permitted use in Chapter 5 under Section 501, which is the M1 district, and under Section 502, which is the M2 district. And I do have the map slides, and I'll just go quickly through these because I know that we've done this in a meeting prior. So these are just some of the M1, M2 locations in town. This is at the entrance to Pinnacle, the Pinnacle. This is actually downtown. So this is coming under the Anderson Street, under the bridge here. So there's some M2. And it comes down the railroad. This is along Highway 394, so this is the industrial parks along Highway 394. And then you have here the intersection of 421 and Highway 394, so there is some M1 and M2 in this area. And then coming out of downtown along the railroad, then you get down into this area along Arkansas Avenue, you have some M1 and M2. And then finally, there are just a couple of spots in town that are zoned M1 or M2 that you might not think of, might not pop out to you as industrial zoned property. So here's a list of those properties. The Exide Building and Fire Station number 4, the northwest corner of Lavender Lane and Bluff City Highway. There is some property, and this is a map that shows the backside of these properties along West State Street. So just for orientation, this is Eggard Funeral Home. So there are some properties right there that do have the back portion of the property zoned M1. The south building at Bristol Motor Speedway and the parcel adjacent to that that's not the Speedway property, Godsey Supply, Bachman Valve, which is the brown building beside of McDonald's on Volunteer Parkway. And then you do have a little section here in this map. This is along Georgia Avenue, across from the cemetery, and here's line power and the state line right here in purple. So there is a little bit of industrial zoning here, and then also here at Delaney Street. So there are just a couple of spots just to call to your attention that are zoned M1 and M2 that could still qualify for the storage unit facility if and when the ordinance is changed. So as Mr. Soares stated in his introduction, the Planning Commission did review this at their April 18th meeting. There was a motion to send a favorable recommendation to City Council for this change, but the motion failed to pass with a 4-4 vote. For that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address before making your comments.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kelly Graham. The address is 101 Evergreen Place, Bristol, Tennessee. I'm coming to you tonight as a member of the Planning Commission. And as you see, it was not a favorable vote, so we want to talk about that a little bit. The history of how ordinances of this type get to you is the city staff, planning staff, writes it, tweaks it, brings it to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission talks about it, tweaks it. There's a lot of comparison that is done between what Bristol is doing, looking to do, and what other cities do. And that's why it goes back and forth. Obviously, this came in front of us in a little different order. You all had passed it at first reading, then it came to us. The ordinance was not written by the planning staff. And we understand the reasoning behind that. I've talked to a couple of you and you said, hey, we want to slow it down. I understand. I'm going to offer you guys a compromise tonight on a way to do just exactly what you want to do, but get back to the normal order. What I would like to propose is a 120-day moratorium at the Planning Commission level on any special use permit for self-storage. The way the ordinance is written, it eliminates the ability to do indoor storage, climate-controlled storage. And I don't think that was your intent. A couple of folks have said, yeah, we want to do away with the garage type. You're going to find a favorable viewpoint on that from the Planning Commission. However, some of the buildings that have been repurposed, built from the ground up, that are climate controlled, they look good. And they really shouldn't be thrown out the way you want to do the garage. Currently, there is no special use permit on file with the planning department for any special use permit at all on anything. So, if you guys would be so kind as to table this motion and the one before it, and give the city staff the opportunity to tweak the motion and get it back and forth with the Planning Commission, I think you'll have a much better ordinance. Instead of writing a bad ordinance and passing a bad ordinance, let's start with a good new one that does exactly what you guys want to do. Even on the ordinance before this, we punched holes in it. The word applicant. We found, well, what if the same project comes in front of us, but the applicant's name has changed? I think if you would let us work on it, we can strengthen that particular ordinance to do what you're intending to do. So what we're asking for, and I can only speak for myself, however, because we have two members of the Planning Commission here, if you will let us try to tweak this ordinance so that it does exactly what you want, you will have a better ordinance. So what we're asking is for you to table both of these ordinances and give the staff time to tweak it, do it in the normal order so that we can bring you a better ordinance. It's not going to have a 4-4 vote. It'll have an ordinance that everybody will agree with. I know it's not the normal process to talk back and forth in a public hearing, but if you guys have any questions about how we're thinking about doing this, I'd love the opportunity to discuss it. All right.
Well, I guess I will, I understand what you're saying, but as it being one member of planning.
Yes.
And you and I spoke today, and after we spoke, I thought about this, and I think that we should, of where we are, I guess, what is the difference? Because you have to go back to planning for the entire planning commission to approve what you are proposing. There's no guarantee that that will happen because there's, what, 9
There are
members?
9 of us.
Nine people, so we don't know that will. Of where we are right now, and by doing that, we would totally stop anything for the 120 days. What we have here would be, they would still be available if someone wanted to do it in one of these zones. And then, and I even said in the beginning when we started this, that there are going to be tweaks to this. I guess the difference of it coming back and then having planning look at it of where we are now and have planning look at where it is, and then if there are changes that want to be made, then bring them back to us.
Hence my proposal. Have your public hearing. Once you've done your public hearings, put the ordinance in your back pocket. You can pull it out at any time once you've done your public hearing. If you feel the need that you got to go ahead and push it through, do it. But give us the opportunity to work with you all, to work with staff, and come up with a better ordinance on both of these. There is not one out there right now. When we have our next Planning Commission meeting, I'll explain all of this to all of us. There's 4 of us in this room tonight that are on the Planning Commission. If we get it passed, you've got a 120-day or until the new ordinance is passed. If you don't get it passed, go ahead and pull the trigger next month and finalize your ordinance. After you've done your public hearing, you can do that. But this puts it on hold. This gives your planning commission, this gives your planning staff, the experts, the opportunity to tweak it to get you exactly what you want. There's holes in both ordinances, and we haven't had the opportunity to go back and forth. You're getting exactly what you want. There will be no more special use permits right now on these. Cannot happen. There has not been a special use permit application made, so there will be one more planning commission meeting where we can discuss it and pass the moratorium of 120 days. If we don't pass it, go ahead and pull the trigger. I think it's a good compromise, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this public hearing is hereby closed. The public hearing is hereby open for Resolution 22-30, adopting a community development block grant and home consortium action plan for fiscal 2023. Ms. Christina Blevins, Community Development Specialist, is with us to summarize this matter for the public.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here with you tonight. Always hard to go after Kelly. I'm here to present to you our HUD one-year draft action plan for our upcoming year. As you know, in May, we always try to start our public outreach and do this public hearing for everybody. Let's see. I wanted to give you just a little bit of history. The Community Development Block Grant Program, also known as CDBG, was created in 1974. Our program here in Bristol started in 76, so we are 46 years old. And we are under the Community Planning and Development Division of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is one of the longest running programs that HUD has still. For this CDBG program, we have 3 national objectives: activities directly benefiting persons of low to moderate income, activities which aid in the elimination of slums and blight, and activities designed to meet community development needs having a particular urgency. Now, number 3 is really, really tricky. The urgent need category is hard to prove with HUD because we are a last resort program with CDBG, so we have to show and prove that we have tried every other resource available in order to meet that objective. Okay, these are the projects we like to present to you tonight. Our allocation of $415 is our 2021, our current allocation. HUD has not released funding numbers, so I'm really promoting the projects rather than the funding itself. Rehab, reconstruction, public services, demolition and clearance, sidewalks, program administration, projected program carryover, and projected program income. Just really quickly, it looks like we are not, we have zeros beside the demo and clearance and zeros beside sidewalks, so it looks like we're not refunding those programs, but those two programs actually have all of the program carryover right now, so we're just going to be continuing what's already started through our department. Okay, so the Northeast Tennessee Virginia Home Consortium. Find where I am. The National Affordable Housing Act of 1990. The intent of the home program is to provide decent, affordable housing to lower income households, expand the capacity of nonprofit housing providers, strengthen the ability of state and local governments to provide housing, and leverage the private sector participation. Our home consortium is a partnership, not with just the organizations or the community, the cities that are surrounding Bristol, Tennessee, but a partnership with the First Tennessee Development District too, as they do help us administer the program. The home consortium has a certain percentage that they work off every year for allocations. Each year, the board actually approves the allocation amount. So we are required by HUD to put 15% into a CHODO set-aside fund, and that is a nonprofit called the Community Housing Development Organization Fund, and that does go for more rental or affordable housing within the full consortium area. You can see there that Bristol, Tennessee gets allocated 11%, Bristol, Virginia 9%, Kingsport 23%, Johnson City 27%, Bluff City gets a flat rate of $10,000, Sullivan County 17%, Washington County 13%, and then the administration, which is split between us and the development district. We only have two programs, two projects within each of these cities, okay? We have rehab reconstruction for low to moderate income families, and then we have home ownership. And those are the only two things other than they working with the Community Housing Development Organization that the home consortium focuses on. All right, so the public plan has been out for, I guess last Monday it was out. You can get it at the Bristol Public Library, Bristol Housing Office, our Development Services Office, the Slater Community Center here out front, and then of course online at bristoltn.org. The public comment has 30 days, and it will end on the 24th. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address before making your comments. Seeing none, this public hearing is hereby closed. This brings us to the appearance of citizens section of our agenda. This section provides an opportunity for the public to address City Council on any matter that is not on the printed agenda for formal consideration. Comments are limited to matters of city business only. A response will not likely be made at this time, since in most cases, neither the City Council or the City Manager will be prepared to effectively respond to the concern. The City Manager will look into this matter and report back to the City Council, or as appropriate, have staff meet with you in an effort to satisfy your concern. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per individual and are not transferable to other individuals. Groups are encouraged to select a spokesperson to represent them. I've been provided a list of individuals desiring to address City Council this evening. On the list, we have Mr. Rick Bott. Mr. Bott, if you would state your name and address.
Good evening. Rick Bott, 3120 Highway 11W, Bluntville, Tennessee. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, and staff. Last month, April the 5th, I came in and made a request to discuss the aging infrastructure and the water main break damage to my property. And it's kind of appropriate tonight because it's Water Conservation Week and Public Works Week. I agree with all those comments. I think all those things are important, particularly water conservation and the training of staff to maintain the infrastructure system. As a result of requesting some geotechnical testing at my property, an engineer was sent out and an opinion letter has been drafted. But I'd like for you to note that in January, when the water main occurred, I actually contacted that engineering firm, and that engineering firm made the recommendation to me to go elsewhere to an engineering firm in Greensboro who had the right expertise and the right method of testing. And he very clearly stated to me that the only way you're going to know the extent of the erosion as a result of the water main break is to do resistivity testing. So I appreciate the letter, the opinion letter, but it's just a little bit of a conflict of interest in my opinion. But I will discuss the remarks of the engineering letter that was made. He refers to karst conditions being in the area. Specifically within that report, the karst conditions are reported to be north of 11W. My property is located south of 11W. So the actual distance the water traveled from the water main outside of the right-of-way was 850 feet. 3 acres of property behind my house was covered in a foot of water for more than 5 months. The engineer's opinion letter states that the amount of water and the time and duration of the leak is unknown. That's not so. April the 5th, I told you, I'll say it again, it was reported 18 months prior to Tennessee Department of Transportation. That water was reported, and it was a known leak for that period of time. It manifested itself over 18 months. That's the reason I've requested the testing. In closing, because I know how quick 3 minutes will go, my wife and I certainly appreciate being on public water. I mean, it's important. And there's folks all over Sullivan County that are on well systems, contaminated water, bacteria, E. coli, and they would love to have access to public water. While we're wasting millions of gallons of water on my property, folks down the street are being denied a water tap. It's just wrong. Simple as I can put it. I appreciate what you're doing, but we're not there yet. I'm not satisfied. There's going to be testing. There's other agencies, I believe, that are taking an interest in this. And at some point, if I have to come every month and do this, that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Mr. Bott, I do recognize, and understand what you're saying, but I think Mr. Sora has provided you with significant information that the council has reviewed as well, and given you a recourse of what you can, choose to do with your insurance.
Yeah, this is not a matter for my insurance. If it's a systemic problem for the city, it requires a systemic solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no one else signed up. Do we have anyone else in the audience this evening that would like to address council? Okay. Next, we will consider appointments to fill 3 positions on the Community Development Advisory Committee. The term of office will be for a period of 3 years ending April the 30th, 2025. The candidates are Ms. Patricia Herndon, Ms. Marjorie Tester, and Steve Willinger. Would anyone like to speak on behalf of the candidates? Please mark your ballots and we'll pass them to the city manager that we read out loud.
We've got a couple of incumbents, Marjorie Tester and Steve Willinger, who I think have worked well, and it's Miss Christina Blevins who works with them. And Patricia Herndon was somebody who came into the office or whatever. Anyway, she's been very instrumental in being helpful, and feels that it'll be a good appointment to that board. Also, another incumbent will see their application next month for the 4th position. Her mother was ill and time caught up, and so we'll see that application and maybe others come back for the remaining position. Thank you.
Okay. Luttrell votes for Patricia Herndon, Marjorie Tester, and Steve Willinger. Robin votes for Patricia Herndon, Marjorie Tester, Steve Willinger. Turner votes for Patricia Herndon, Marjorie Tester, Steve Willinger. Hutton votes for Patricia Herndon, Marjorie Tester, and Steve Willinger. And Powers votes for Patricia Herndon, Marjorie Tester, and Stephen Willinger.
Okay. We'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. This evening, we have several items for consideration under the topic of ordinance and resolutions. The first item is for the first reading, ordinance 22-4, amending the zoning map of the city of Bristol, Tennessee by designating certain property at 2216 Volunteer Parkway as B3 General Business Zone. Mr. Sawyer, would you please summarize ordinance 22-4?
Yes, Mayor. Our Planning Commission recently reviewed a rezoning request for property located at 2016 and 2222 Volunteer Parkway, 2216 and 2222 Volunteer Parkway. Both properties are currently split zoned with an R1A low-density residential and a B3 general business zone present on both properties. The request from the property owner on 2016 was for the R1A portion to be rezoned as B3. Planning staff extended their research to include 2022. Planning Commission reviewed the matter during their March meeting and forwarded a favorable recommendation for the rezoning of one R1A portion on 2016 Volunteer Parkway only. Ms. Young will detail this issue, as council is aware, from a process standpoint. If you approve this matter on first reading this evening, then at our June meeting, a public hearing and second reading will be scheduled. Sheriff?
Thank you. Hello again. We will start after Mr. Sawyer's introduction with a map that highlights the location and zoning of these parcels. So and this one's a little bit difficult to look at, but this is the Boer, what we're calling the Boer property. So this is 2216, and the parcel boundaries are outlined in red. So you have parcel, the Boer property here, and then this is the church property located at the intersection of Volunteer Parkway and Richmond Heights Road. So that parcel is also outlined in red. This bold black line that runs through the church property and then goes other direction through the Boer property is the zoning boundary line. So both of these parcels are split zoned. The red color is indicative of the B3 or general business zone that runs up and down Volunteer Parkway. The R1A matches here with the single-family residential area behind Tennessee Hills along Richmond Heights Road and back into this neighborhood. So that line, the bold line, is the zoning boundary line. So you can see both parcels have a split zone on their property. There are a variety of land uses here in this area. I know everybody knows this section of town well, but you do have car lots, Walmart, florist warehouse, you have the church, and then of course you have the neighborhood back in behind these properties. So just a little information on each one. The Boer property, it's approximately 8 acres total. It has 720 feet along Volunteer Parkway, 51 feet back here on Richmond Heights Road. A portion of this property here is located in the flood zone. So that does make development down in this area closer to the creek development. There's really no building in this dark pink, dark red area. And there is some construction that can take place here if it's elevated to a certain point. But as you can see, that does take up a good chunk of his property here. So that is the special flood hazard area. It's classified as an AE area. The portion of the parcel that's requested for rezoning, so it's hatched here with this red hatch line. Again, switch to blue here. The blue is indicative of the property boundary. So this red hatched area that is a portion of Mr. Boer's property, is approximately 1.8 acres of his total 8 acres. Just for information, there was a special use permit for a storage facility that was approved for this property in 2014, and that is still valid and runs with the property. The Sacred Cross Assembly of God property, I would just give you a couple little facts here. This is about 2.26 acres total, 325 feet along Volunteer Parkway, and then 302 along Richmond Heights Road. And the portion that was considered for rezoning here is about 1.5 acres. Here are a few photos of the property. So this is Volunteer Parkway looking towards the church. And this is from Richmond Heights Road looking back behind the church down towards the Boer property. Just a couple little excerpts of our analysis on this rezoning request. Staff felt that given the subject property's location along this commercial corridor and the fact that there is B3 zone all in this area, that B3 zone could be suitable for a rezoning request. However, this existing R1 does provide a better transition for the neighborhood. Topographically, this part of the property is really hilly, as you all know from driving by and from the photos. So there's not a lot of building area right here in this area against these residential properties. But we did feel that Mr. Boer could see some benefit by rezoning this portion of his property B3, so he would have a little bit more buildable area for a commercial project if this section is rezoned. Just a quick note, any future development on this parcel will go through the site plan application process and special use if warranted. We don't have any proposed use for the property as of right now. So just a quick summary of permitted uses. The R1A is a single-family zoning district that does allow single-family and duplex. It does allow some minimal special use permit items. And then your B3 zone, of course, is that general business zone that allows a much more expanded utilization of the property with commercial uses as seen on the screen. The future land use map shows this area as commercial, so everything on this map in dark red is categorized for commercial development on the future land use map. And Land Use Policy 3 supports the rezoning request, saying that we should look to sustain commercial areas while providing for adequate and compatible growth and expansion. Again, given the subject property location along this commercial corridor, the B3 zone in the area, we thought B3 was suitable for the area. There was a public notification sign that's up on the property now. We did receive a couple phone calls requesting information, so 4 telephone calls with just questions, general curiosity about the rezoning request. 2 additional phone calls were received that did express opposition to the project. We did have 2 people speak to the Planning Commission. One was the owner of 2216 Volunteer Parkway, Mr. Boer. He's here in the audience tonight. And then the other was a resident of Timberlane Road who spoke of concerns about access onto Richmond Heights Road from the property. So quickly, because this is in your packet and probably just want to make sure it's clear, the staff recommendation to Planning Commission was to rezone the entire portion of the church property. And then this section of Mr. Boer's property. So giving him the expanded area to build in a B3 area, but to save this area here so that there would be no new commercial zone introduced to the property line shared with single-family residences. So that was the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission. But upon discussion of this topic, the Planning Commission did vote on March 21st to send a favorable recommendation to City Council for the Boer property alone. So rezoning this section of R1A that's on the Boer property, rezone that to B3, and to leave this remaining R1A zone on the church property. So leave that remaining. So that is the Planning Commission recommendation to City Council tonight, and I would be happy to answer any questions you all may have. And again, Mr. Boer's with us in the audience, so I'm sure he would be happy to speak to the project as well.
Ms. Young, I have one just for clarification to the public. The church, did they have any issues with this?
Oh, so just to clarify, the church did not submit a request initially. Mr. Brewer submitted the request. And as we looked at the request, if and when this rezoning takes place, it just leaves that little section of R1A remaining. Typically, our strategy is to go ahead and round that off where we can, so we don't have little strips of R1A or different zones in the middle of other sections. The church was agreeable to that request to be included in the rezoning, but staff did approach the church, and then they were notified of the Planning Commission recommendation, and since they didn't initially come forward with that request, I don't think there were any hurt feelings there not having that request approved, but we did fill them in on the happenings to date.
The church's
Well,
property.
I'm sorry.
The church's property, it actually sits on two different parcels.
This is actually one parcel, but it's this bold line here is the zoning boundary. So it's the split zone of all that frontage along Volunteer Parkway is B3, and then this section is R1A.
Can you go back to your staff recommendation?
And also go back to where you were for what actually came from planning on that. So I guess for me, I know this piece of property well, of the first of all, it's 51 feet from the property line from the church back in that corner to where the other is. There's nothing because of setbacks. You couldn't put anything in there anyway, correct? I mean, if there's only 51 feet between, because it sits in between the property, I would say, and it looks like it's about 51 feet, and then it may go to 70-some feet of really putting anything, and plus of how much dirt, you would have the wall that is behind Lowe's that would have to be in there to access any of that anyway, correct? I mean,
I think it'd be very unlikely anything would be built in here.
Right.
It does. Yeah, you're correct. There's not enough space, and then also that topography is not. It doesn't lend itself towards building anything. I mean, in this area, and like I said, with the special use permit approval, I mean, there is some buildable area here, but he's constrained by this floodplain,
Yeah.
and then this being really hilly right here.
well, it looks like I know it's all, if it's 51 feet in the back, that one section, you're probably, what are we, 100 feet of the section that's in the hatch up the side there?
A little bit more than that.
On this
but-
side?
On this side.
Yes,
It was just a little bit more than that,
yeah,
but not much.
but it goes into that hill right
Right.
past
It
that.
does. And you
that
can
hill.
actually, on this photo, you can see how it starts to
Yeah,
rise right there.
you can't, of what type of wall you'd have to put in there, I don't.
So the staff's recommendation and the commission's recommendation differ slightly. What's the rationale in the difference?
Well, I think that the staff recommendation was just to provide some assurance for these folks right there that they wouldn't have a zone up against their back property line that's B3. And as we discussed, it would be difficult to build something in there, and I think that's what lended to the Planning Commission recommendation to go ahead and rezone that whole area as B3, with the acknowledgement that if and when it develops, that a buffer, landscape buffer, would be required back there for the folks that live on the other side of the property line. But that just, I think they recognized that it would be unlikely that something would be built there, so they were comfortable making that recommendation.
So remind us what that vote was, because it wasn't unanimous.
It wasn't. That vote was a 7-2 vote. I believe the two members of council did not vote for the Planning Commission recommendation.
Can you tell me that lot, I think it looks like lot 100, is there anything in it?
Lot 100?
Yeah, it's the first one as you go up Richmond Heights, right there on the right.
Right here.
Yeah, there's a house.
No,
Right here.
right there. Is there a house there? I can't see it on the, what I have on, I can't see anything in there. Is it a vacant lot? Is it empty?
I don't believe there's anything on that lot.
Okay. Is some of their concern is access from Richmond Heights?
That was one of the gentlemen that spoke at the Planning Commission meeting, and the zoning itself doesn't dictate the access. As long as there was an access that met the access standards and the driveway regulations of the city, then an access could be granted there. Now,
It could be granted now. That's my understanding.
correct,
Right.
correct. Now, with the special use permit, one of the criteria of review for the special use permit is ingress and egress, and the commission at that time in 2014 did make a stipulation on that approval that they could not have access onto Richmond Heights Road. Now, of course, that ties to the special use permit for the storage facility, but outside of that, the zoning doesn't prohibit access as long as they can meet the standards.
I don't believe that, I mean, of any development that would be done on this would want to come from Richmond Heights. I mean, once again, this property sits down so much lower than where Richmond Heights Road is and where the church is and those houses. I just don't.
Well, the only way that they could is if they were traveling north on Volunteer Parkway and needed to come across and enter that way rather than having to go down and turn around to come back. If the entrance were on the Volunteer Parkway, it's not readily accessible from all lanes of traffic.
I don't even know, I mean, actually, of that one piece of being 50 feet, I don't think you could put the part that, where you could go in there that with setbacks from the property lines. Could you even?
Because you'd have setbacks from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
What would the setback be on that?
Yeah.
So there would be a B3 setback in here. I mean, I don't think it would be conceivable that you could build in that
Build
area.
anything, yeah. That's why, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you have a
understand that
20-foot rear, you have a 20-foot rear setback, a 15-foot front setback in the B3 zone.
Right.
So you're immediately going to be eating up that
Yeah.
50-foot strip.
Yeah.
Ms. Young, that one little section on this lower corner towards, or it's running parallel to the highway. Yeah, is that part of Mr. Boer's property as well, or is that someone
That's the
else's?
churches.
The church.
Churches.
Church got
Yes,
that,
sir.
so that would be part of that
Yeah.
change.
It would not.
No, it would
The
not.
front's already B3.
It's already there.
Okay.
Right.
It's B3.
So next question is, could an access road be put in to that off the highway?
To, from right here?
Mm-hmm.
They
So-
put it down lower, further
Or
north.
somewhere right in there, yes.
Along Volunteer Parkway right
I
here?
don't think so, the way that hill.
Yeah, there's
where that
spacing
church sits at.
requirements for driveways that they would have to meet. I don't know that they would be able to. And then the fact that there's a
Yeah.
pretty good hill, I don't know that that would.
The grade would be true.
But on the state route, there are TDOT spacing requirements for those driveways. So I would imagine that close to that intersection would be a tough.
So is it appropriate to share some of Planning Commission's thoughts at this point? We're kind of moving a little bit into discussion. So there was concern about rezoning the church property completely to B3 for future use, et cetera. So that was one. The other is that we did not talk about or consider for any vote to take staff's recommendation with taking the church out. So it'd be so it would increase slightly, but goes to a point back to the residential. So it still leaves the majority of that part that probably can't be developed, but protects it with the leaves it as R1. So we didn't really put that forth as a motion. So that's another I mean, I assume today, we could take staff's recommendation, we could take planning commission's recommendation, or we could make our own recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Is there a motion to take action on this item?
So are we taking action on the planning commission's?
Whatever you want to, so
So we
I
put
guess we need to be clear with that, yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve what has come from the planning commission on it. I feel like that, I'll make the motion. And then
Probably
we can
clarifies it.
And this is the planning commission's.
Yes, it is. What's in front of you in this ordinance it reflects the planning commission's
Correct.
recommendation. Yes.
That's what that is.
I second.
Motion, have a second. Would any member of council like to discuss any further ordinance 22-4?
I still prefer, even though it's unlikely, I prefer providing that extra transition, so I'm going to vote against this motion and would prefer staffs without the church being in it. So I'll vote no.
Well, I guess for me, of just looking at where that is, that's of cleaning it. For me, of cleaning it up, of where it's all zoned the same. You're not going to be, once again, there can't be anything with the setbacks. There can't be anything really built there. And so that buffer of whatever would go in there would be kind of the same buffer of what it is now that is there. So that's my only thought on.
So you'd have not only the setbacks, but within the setback, backing up to the residential, there would be a requirement of I guess, a landscaped buffer.
Right, the setback would apply to the building or structure that was placed, I would imagine more in this area. But yes, and then an additional landscape buffer would be provided for business use against a single-family residential use.
Okay, would anyone in the audience like to address council's matter? I believe Mr. Boer is here. If there's anything you'd like to add?
My name is Jeff Boer. I'm the owner of the property. My address is 286 Southampton Drive, Bristol, Tennessee. We did go in front of the Planning Commission, and it was approved, all the property. And one of the statements that I made before is, this is commercial property. I mean, we've got all this property on the Volunteer Parkway that if you guys could do it over again, a little forward thought that it would be all commercial up and down through there. There would be not a lot of housing right on the road. But this is commercial property. That's the reason I bought it, for commercial property. Not saying that it would be developed back there, because it is a very, very steep area. But if I do develop the property, and this is just me being of business mind, is when you try to sell property, when I try to do something, if I was to build something and sell it in the future, there's about an acre of property in the original, what they proposed, that was going to be the R1A still. When you sell a piece of property, and I said this to the Planning Commission, which has a couple people, has a real estate guy, has a guy that does commercial property, that does commercial moving of property. Value of property compared to R1A to business, there is a big difference. This is a business decision on my part. I need to have the capacity to do stuff. The the availability of me doing anything back there, none. And that first lot right there, there's not a house on, as a matter of fact. There's only 2 houses that buffer my property, and they're way back. I'm probably not going to mess with it. I've got plans to do something else with it. I don't want to put storage units on it, which it's already approved for. But
thank you.
I want to do something a little different. Yeah. So, I would like for it to be zoned, B3, the whole property. It makes it a lot easier to sell, to develop, to do anything with. It makes sense to me that it's all zoned one area.
And I guess also if you're going to borrow money against it.
Absolutely. It makes such a big difference.
And of even parts that you can't use, that acreage will be included in at the same rate as the rest of it.
You are correct, Vice Mayor. And, in that regard, that's the reason I bought the property. So, and I appreciate your time, guys. I appreciate all you guys do. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
So, would it make any difference at all to the church if we just zoned it all B3? It doesn't impact them in any way, does it?
They were agreeable with that option, but that was just not what the Planning Commission recommended for that property. But they were in agreement with a rezone of their R1A portion to B3 as well.
Wouldn't it just be cleaner and more simple to just do it all B3 if they're not in opposition?
So that was that's kind of what sent us down that road of, you have a little bit of an oddity here with this R1A for half this property. So that's what got us to talk to the church to see if they'd want to be a part of this rezoning request.
Councilman Turner, would you be open to an amendment to your motion?
Yeah, I would. If the church is okay with it, then I don't have. The front portion of their property is already B3, and
I'd like to make that amendment if you're open to that.
Whatever we need to do to amend this let's
So
make
at
it
this
clean.
time, there's a motion on the floor with a second, and so it would be appropriate for Councilman Hutton to move to amend the current motion, which is to approve the ordinance as written. And Councilman Hutton, if you can explain in your motion how you'd like to amend it, and then if there's a second for that, there would be a vote on the amendment to the ordinance, and then if that is approved, we would have a vote on the ordinance itself as amended.
So explain your motion.
Ball's in your court, Councilman Hutton.
I was processing.
Sorry.
Well, I think it makes sense in the long run for that whole piece to be B3 rather than be split zone. If it ever, God forbid, but if it was at ever a point that the church property were to become available and we'd had to rezone it later on, it just seems a simpler thing to make it all B3 than just have it cut in half. It's cleaner to me, and if it doesn't impact them, which it shouldn't, and they were agreeable to it, I think we should just go ahead and make the whole thing B3.
May I speak before you all vote on that amendment and give you the rationale of why the church was taken out?
It's up to the chair.
The reason the church was taken out, Kelly Graham at the Planning Commission, the reason the church was taken out is because when you look at the photograph of the church up on top of the hill, and you look at everything that's allowed in a B3 zone and its proximity to the subdivision back behind it, B3 is not the proper use of that property. I don't think we have the list up here, but truck repair garage, various things like that would not be good
back in that subdivision, and it's sitting up on top of the hill. I agree with you, it'd be great to clean up lines, but that particular piece of property should stay as R1 instead of, if something were to happen to that church, if it were to be bought and torn down and turned into something commercial, it's the things that you can do in a B3 zone, that's not the proper use of that property, and that's why it was taken out and voted against.
I guess you could run into an issue like down on the Parkway on the corner of going into the issue of, yeah. I say that I'll keep my motion as it was presented. And we're talking about, this is what we're talking, what we're we have up here in the hat.
The Planning Commission recommended.
That's what we are. Okay, that was what my motion was, and I guess if you're still second on, okay.
Well, I want to circle back to Sheriff before we throw the gauntlet down. So, would you please weigh in on that as well? Is staff in agreement with the Planning Commission in that it's best to leave the church as R1A?
So the staff recommendation was this, which is on the screen. So that would say that anything in this hatched area would be rezoned to B3. And our analysis was built on the proximity of that property to the commercial corridor, the future land use map, but to leave that area just as an additional little buffer there for the folks right here. But the Planning Commission discussion did go and add a different element to the church property. Now, Mr. Chairman Graham is correct. If you do rezone that property, you do have these additional uses that could go in if ever, whenever the church would cease to exist there. Now, I don't have any indication at this point in time that the church is interested or willing or even considering anything else, but that is a permitted use list for that B3 zone. But it does make the map a little odd. Again, if you think back to Mr. Boer's first request was to rezone to make this all B3. So you have B3 that wraps around the church right here, but then this sliver of the church, the front entry portion would come into this B3 zone. Then you'd have B3 across the front, but the remainder of the church is in this R1A zone. So it just cleans up the map to zone it all B3, but I certainly can understand some of the members of the Planning Commission that are concerned about the neighborhood that expressed concern for rezoning the entirety of that church portion to B3.
I wouldn't want to end up in the same situation that the piece of property right on back on the Volunteer Parkway of what that ended up with that. So that was my, I like of cleaning it up, but I guess I'm thinking of right there.
Can I circle back just a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. The thing is that what's already on the table is this right here, the B3, and that actually puts all of this right in the back as well. It's already, if we pass Mr. Turner's motion, the B3 extends all the way back.
I think what Mr. Graham was saying is because of the elevation, that makes a difference for the church. I'll also say, anyway, we have some other areas that when residential has to look down on commercial, it is not the best. But anyway, I think that was the issue, is the height of it and what you look at, et cetera, that puts it at the same height so that it's more integrated in the neighborhood because of the height. So, just.
I'm for this motion that we have. I'm just saying it's all going to be B3 anyway. So I don't know. anything that's on that list can still go back there if he's able to develop it back there. That's what I'm saying, like.
But should the church then present itself as no longer being there, which we certainly hope that doesn't
Right.
happen, then there is, I see where the commission is coming from. It's cleaner. It doesn't have as many uses. And then at that time, into whatever point into the future, things may have changed, and there may be a more brilliant path forward with that. So to retain it as the R1A is probably a good move.
I'll also say that, not to add to this, but just a comment with being brought up. As humans, I think it's natural for us to like straight lines, for us to like to be organized, et cetera, but I think it's something to be really careful about. And this one may not have the same kind of effects that something else, that our inclination would be, yeah, we want to straighten things up. But because of history and because of previous use, et cetera, sometimes that might not be the best decision. And also, just to say, first off, this whole corridor is difficult. It was a main highway, and with a good bit of it, including this part, wasn't annexed for a long time. But I think if planners, if they could have designed, yes, the front would have been commercial, but then there would have been a zone of multifamily or something, that those transitions that would buffer it. And we have that a few places, but because of how volunteer parkways develop, we don't have much opportunity to do that. So we have a lot of B3 abutting R1, and it's not always the best solution. So, thank you.
So just so I'm clear, I know everybody else is probably on top of this. We're not touching the church, right? It's going
Right.
to remain as it is.
Right.
Okay.
That's what my motion is, that we go second. Okay.
Okay, we've had a motion, we have a second. I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Mayor, if I could just say, I know it's, for people watching and for people here, this seems to be very laborious and
Tedious.
time-consuming and tedious. Our planning department and our planning commission, as well as those of us on council, are being it's like drinking from a fire hydrant right now. We have so much coming to us, and we are very conscious of the fact that topography is a real challenge for us in some areas, and that we have some wonderful developable land, and we want to get it right. So if you will just hang with us, and if we seem to be long and tedious, that's why, is we want to be sure that we're getting it right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the first reading of Ordinance 22-5, amending Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to adaptive use permits. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize Ordinance 22-5?
Yes, Mayor. Part of the fiscal 2022 plan of work, as detailed in our goals and objectives for our planning staff and by extension the Planning Commission, was to look at regulations that would allow for the productive reuse of underutilized structures. The Rosemont Elementary School is a good example of this. They're in a residential neighborhood. It's a former school, so it kind of has some limited applications based on our current zoning regulations. So for most of the last fiscal year, our Planning Commission spent a great deal of time working to develop regulations that would allow a more productive utilization of these underutilized properties. And with that, Ms. Young, could you detail the recommendation and the provisions set forth in Ordinance 22-5?
Y'all are going to get tired of me tonight. Okay, so the next item we have here for first reading is the Special Adaptive Reuse Ordinance. And this is one, I always say the Planning Commission works hard on these, but the Planning Commission really worked hard on this one and spent over a year looking at what other communities do and refining what we had put together for them to review in a draft format, and looked at all just the different elements that could occur with introducing a commercial use into a residential area. But what the proposed ordinance will do that you all have in front of you this evening is to change Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 of the zoning ordinance to allow an adaptive reuse of a commercial project in a residential zone with the special use permit process. So as Mr. Soar stated, there are properties around town, a lot of them located in the older area, older neighborhoods. Their churches, their schools, their businesses that served as the anchor of the community at a time when we weren't so car dependent. So we do have these commercial structures that are located in town. One is the Rosemont School here on the screen, and another example is this building on East Cedar Street. That as a residentially zoned property, there's very little that you can do with it, so it sits vacant and underutilized, and then unfortunately in some situations becomes a bit run down for lack of use. So what you all have in the packet, and I know this is hard to read on the screen for the folks in the audience, but you have a proposal with the language highlighted in yellow, which will amend our ordinance to allow for an adaptive reuse project. So the first item, we would add a definition for a special use or special adaptive reuse project. That's item 203. It's at the top of the screen here. And then in section 217, we would add an item B. So item A is the special use permit procedure. Item B is the adaptive reuse permit. And what that will state is that the special adaptive reuse section facilitates the conversion of older, economically distressed, or historically significant buildings to reduce vacant space and encourage the sensitive adaptive reuse of existing buildings. It goes into what is considered a commercial, existing commercial or institutional building. And then it allows, it references the special use permit process. It tasks the Planning Commission to use the special use permit criteria in reviewing and approving these adaptive reuse permits. And then it also sets forth some additional stipulations for them to consider when they're reviewing an application, such as business hours, noise, lighting, just some additional things that might impact these adaptive reuse projects. It does allow for a multifamily component within a special adaptive reuse building, but it wouldn't allow it at a greater density than what the neighborhood already allows. So item B stipulates all of these special adaptive reuse elements, and then in the following pages that actually are in Chapter 3, so you'll see 301, you'll see the list of the residential zones, and then the uses that would be allowed in each one. So it's fairly limited in the R1A zone, but then you get into the R2 and RE zone. Those are those older areas of town where the potential commercial uses of those adaptive reuse buildings are a little bit more expanded. And the Planning Commission was very diligent in looking through those lists to try to scale the reuse of those buildings to uses that would serve the neighborhood. So that is the summary of the adaptive reuse ordinance. The Planning Commission did review this on March 21st, and they did vote to send a favorable recommendation to City Council for the proposed ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all have.
Any questions? You've done a good job explaining it.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Motion to approve ordinance 22-5.
Have a second?
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss ordinance 22-5?
I would only say that as we continue to work to be that progressive community that we want to be, this is very important and critical, and we appreciate the commission's taking the time, along with staff, to research this. We do have a lot of older buildings in our community, and I think that we have a lot of creative minds in our community, and with the assistance of the planning department and with this ordinance, perhaps we'll have some special adaptive reuses to come forward.
Agreed, and I think a lot of folks have gone to other communities and seen some pretty interesting things with adaptive reuse, and I know we've got some folks in our community who are interested, who've been waiting for this, so I think it will be exciting, creative, hopefully fun for some things, so I think it's great.
Would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter? Okay, hearing none, I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers? Yes.
Luttrell?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Firerobbin?
Yes.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is the reading of Ordinance 22-6, amending Chapter 3 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates planned residential districts. Mr. Sword, would you please summarize Ordinance 22-6?
Yes, Mayor, we do have several items coming out of the Planning Commission this evening, so bear with us, and we have more following this item on the agenda. But in 2012, City Council at that time approved what was named the Planned Residential District, and this new district was designed to address regulations which had been involved in cluster developments or zero lot line developments. Planned Residential District, with the new regulations at that time, provided a variety of housing types to be placed in a residential setting that was environmentally sensitive in terms of the development. Since that time, we've only had two developments that have come out that have used the PRD regulations as far as their development. Staff found some of the ordinance drafted at the time and the regulations embedded in it lacked a lot of clarity. They were difficult to understand for staff and the development community. So as we have several other topics, the Planning Commission set about trying to create an improved document that would be better utilized by the development community, and what you have in front of you tonight details that. Ms. Young, would you like to further describe the recommendations for amendments to the PRD?
Yes, sir. So I'll dive right into the summary of the changes that are included in this PRD revision. Currently, in our ordinance today, there's a 2-acre minimum to rezone to a PRD development district. The proposed draft ups that to 10 acres, so you'd have to have a 10-acre minimum of either one 10-acre parcel plus or an assemblage of 10 acres total to qualify to submit for a PRD rezoning request and to submit the follow-up site plan or subdivision plat, whatever guided your project. This draft ordinance eliminates the commercial component of a PRD. Currently, the existing planned residential development allows for a commercial component. The draft PRD, as you all have in your packet tonight, eliminates the commercial component. The Planning Commission did express interest, though, in continuing to have that discussion to see if there's a concept or a vehicle that would make a commercial component appropriate. So we're continuing to work on that. But that's not a part of what's proposed for your review tonight. The PRD, as it does currently on the books today, allows for a different type of housing unit. So it allows for single-family, two-family, duplex. It allows for multifamily units. This PRD draft, and I'll show you a picture in just a moment, it requires that if there is a driveway with access from the road or access way, it must be 20 feet in length to keep cars from sticking out into the street, more appropriately trucks from sticking out into the street. And this does require an open space component for the development if multifamily is a part of the development plan. Let's see, let me go to my next slide. So important to this ordinance is setback or building placement requirements. So this brings in some of the flexibility that some of the developers looking at projects in our community were expressing interest in. The PRD ordinance requires a perimeter project buffer. So if you are adjacent to something that's not a PRD or a commercial project, if you're any of our R zones or other residential zones, there's going to be a required project perimeter buffer. If you're constructing single-family homes, that's 25 feet. If it's multifamily, it's 35 feet. And there are specific setbacks for what we are calling transition lots, which I'll show you what that is in just a minute. But there are some specific side and front yard setbacks that would be required if you're in a transition lot area. The PRD does allow for multifamily, but it has some stipulations placed on it. So if it's a multifamily structure that's at that perimeter adjacent to a residential zone, there is a maximum of 4 units that could be in the building, so that attempts to keep the scale of the multifamily to where it relates to the single family on the outside of the PRD. The maximum building width for any of those multifamily buildings, if it's adjacent to the perimeter, is 80 feet. If there is a multifamily component that's internal to the PRD, so if there's 4-unit multifamily on the outskirts of the project or single family, a 6-unit multifamily building could go internal to the development. So
how many 6-unit buildings can go in? It depends on the acreage.
It does. So the density, and that's on my next slide here, I think, maybe the next item. Well, where'd that go? So the density of the PRD, the maximum density that you could have is 6 units per acre. So there's no limit in the draft as far as how many 6-unit buildings you could have, but it's driven by the size of the property. But at no point could you have a multifamily structure that has more than 6 units in it. So again, it's to keep it to a scale that's more appropriate as a transition to single-family residential neighborhoods. So the proposed ordinance, I've clipped it and is shown on the screen, is included in your packet, but this just summarizes. Let me flip open to my copy. So this just includes all the changes I kind of summarized here. The ordinance is set up with several different elements. It talks about minimum parcel size, 10 acres, which we discussed. It talks about the residential uses allowed, which we discussed. It talks about density, that's item 2B. Again, the overall density for a planned residential development cannot exceed 6 units per acre. It talks about setback requirements, so I went through those and said I'd talk about the transition lots here in just a second. So we're at that second. And I'll show you just an example. I know this is difficult to see on the screen, but this is the existing neighborhood of Fox Meadows. And it goes on up here. This is just a little excerpt from the concept plan. So this shows the new lot configuration, some new lot configuration. And what we're talking about when we're talking about transition lots is where you have an existing home in the first section of Fox Meadows and a new lot beside it. The Planning Commission is going to have the extra scrutiny and authority to set the setbacks for those lots. So they'll be able to review and work with the developer to say, here's what makes sense in providing a transition to that existing neighborhood. Where the PRD doesn't mandate a front yard setback, we just want to make sure that there's some cohesion in the older section and the new section. Now, again, I'm talking about a specific project, but this would mean anytime there's an extension of a street into a new section of a development, and it would also include any time, and I don't have an example of this because it's not occurred yet, but if there is a existing public route where a PRD would front on that public route, the developer and then the Planning Commission could approve the setbacks for whatever those first buildings are to just make sure that there's some sort of transition or translation to the existing development in the community. the second page of the draft talks about the multifamily requirements, which we went over, talks about the driveways, and again, that, structures could, within the internal part of the PRD, they could be closer to the street than what we have set forth in our traditional zoning districts. But if there is a driveway that's coming off that street, it's going to have to be the appropriate depth to store the vehicles present in the driveway. The PRD does require each dwelling unit to have 2 parking spaces. This is more than what's in our current parking regulations for multifamily projects. Currently, our parking regs only require 1.5 spaces for a multifamily project, so this ups it to 2 just to make sure that there is adequate parking for the project. And then the rest of the ordinance is really kind of procedures, required submittals, and some of those elements that we're required to conclude zoning ordinances with. So that sets forth the application requirements, procedures, approvals, and then some stipulations for if a homeowners association or some sort of management group is in place to govern the open space, if there's open space required for the project. So those are these slides. I'm sorry I didn't skip to the appropriate slides. So those are these slides that talk about process. So I do have just a bit of a comparison though for you tonight that just looks at the existing zones and what is allowed in those zones versus the PRD. So what kind of development parameters there are for different residential zones. I do have a copy of this if that's appropriate to give you. I know it's hard to read this on the screen, but I'll. I just wanted to provide some overview of how the PRD can relate to our existing residential zones. And while it does provide some flexibility that we don't have in these residential zones, it's not necessarily any kind of a free-for-all development ordinance. So I'll just go through the kind of highlights of these. So in the chart, you do have, I did place R1A, R2, R3, B3, because you can do and have residential developments in the B3 zone. And then the PRD. So if you look down through the zones, it's just a simple list of those zones. Note, again, there's no minimum to rezone for any of the residential zones with the exception of the PRD.
Cheryl?
Yes.
This group sitting right back here in the corner, they may benefit from having a copy of this as you talk.
I do have one more, but I'll be happy to email those to you. I can email. I'd be happy to email those. But so what you have is just a summary description of the setbacks, the lot space requirements, the building area, and height. So this is how our zoning ordinance reads in terms of dimensional requirements for the residential zone. So you can go down through here. You can see the setbacks. The R1A zone is what we have a lot of in our larger lot subdivisions. So you can see that there are some 35-foot setbacks, minimum lot area of 14,520 square feet, and a minimum lot width of 75 feet. The density allowance for the R1A zone is 3 units per acre. So that's the R1A zone. R2 starts stepping down. So you have front yard, rear yard setbacks of 30 feet. You have a minimum lot area of 7,500 square feet, and you have a maximum density of 9 units per acre. So that's the R2 district. That's what for example, the existing Fox Meadows is zoned R2. So they could conceivably construct 9 units per acre on that section. If you go to R3, this starts stepping into our multifamily development. So again, you step down to front yard setback of 25, rear yard setback of 30 feet. Minimum lot area goes down to 6,000 square feet, and that maximum density goes up to 13 units per acre. If you go to the next page, you'll have B3. And this talks about residential development in B3. So this is, our B3 is on our commercial corridors, Volunteer Parkway, West State Street, Highway 394. You're going to have a lot of your B3 zone. There are residential developments that could develop according to the B3 standards solely. So this residential structures requirements for B3 allows the front yard setback 25 feet, rear yard 20 feet. It does allow the step down in lot size to 5,000 square feet. And then the B3 zone allows for a maximum density for multifamily units at 35 units per acre. So that exists in our zone, or our zoning ordinance now. So then finally, you get down to PRD. So this is just a quick summary, putting our proposed regulations that you had on the screen in front of you into this chart that we have in our zoning ordinance now. And you can see the side by side. This eliminates that front yard, side yard setback unless you're in a lot that's in a transition area. It gives that perimeter project boundary requirement for setbacks. If you look in lot space, folks that do a subdivision development, they're still going to be required to do that 50-foot lot frontage, so no lot's going to be narrower than 50 feet. That's required by our subdivision regulations. You have the multifamily stipulation in the lot space column, and then you'll see in building area, the maximum units is 6 units per acre. So the PRD in terms of density drops between the R1A and the R2 district for density allowances. And then in the height column for the PRD, you have a maximum height for multifamily at 35 feet. So that's just I know a very quick summary of a lot of information related to our residential zones, but I wanted to provide sort of a placement of where this PRD zone can fall within our existing regs for existing zones. And then finally, one more just screen of information for you, and this came up a little bit during our during the work session, to talk about sidewalk requirements and street lighting requirements. So sidewalks and street lights are required in our subdivision regulations. So any project where a developer is going to plat lots for sale is going to go through a subdivision plat process. And that is it's governed by our zoning ordinance, it's governed by our subdivision regulations. So I just wanted to be clear, I didn't have this screen during the work session, but just to show you all that in section 5037, which talks about pedestrian ways, that sidewalks are to be provided, sidewalks shall be provided by the subdivider on all new public streets, excluding alleyways, and on the extension of existing public streets where sidewalks exist. So that is going to be a requirement for any new streets in these PRD developments that are developed that have to utilize our subdivision regulations.
And these pertain to the PRD?
These pertain to any subdivision in the city of Bristol. So anything that goes through the subdivision plat process would be required to look at these regulations.
So we did talk about sidewalks some, and we talked about moving toward, we're putting them in our zoning ordinance, not just in subdivision regs. And I think we talked about whether it would be possible to go ahead and include sidewalks and put it into this new zone, not just in the subdivision regs, but also to add it to this zone, and whether that would be possible. And if so, do we do that with an amendment tonight, or do we ask for it to come back that way, or whatever, if that is something we want to move forward on?
My only concern, if it's not in this, is that once a project is brought to us, it is under the umbrella of the regs at that moment. And so if we don't have everything in the reg that is the desire of the Planning Commission and Council, then a project could come forward that would not be required to have all of those elements. But you're saying, if I'm correct, that these are the regs for any new development, would be the sidewalk, the curbing, and the lighting. Does that apply to new roads as well as extensions of roads? Or how does that work? Is there a differentiation between an extended road and a new road?
So the way that the subdivision regulations read, so sidewalks shall be provided by the subdivider on all new public streets. excluding alleyways, and on the extension of existing public streets where sidewalks exist. So if there is an existing street that has sidewalks on it and that street is extended, then the sidewalks would be required.
So in the case of Fox Meadows,
They do not have sidewalks.
But on the concept proposal with all the new streets, those new sections will have sidewalks.
even the extensions, because the extension is going to be coming off of a
An
street that
existing
doesn't
street.
have that.
I don't think that the way it's in the concept plan, all of those, anything that's new that is a new street within that expanded phase has a sidewalk. And if you went out there, I mean, everybody probably drove out there after the work session, but they don't. I think, and I worked, I guess, with Tim long enough, and I'm sure Mr. Sora can chime in, but there is a lot of, it's not just as easy as putting a sidewalk on the street if there's an existing situation. And I don't have the engineering expertise to explain all that, but if there's an existing street profile, it's not like you can just kind of put some, you can't just go a different direction on an existing street.
Much like our sidewalk project on Bluff City Highway, for example, it's designed to sheet flow off to the side of the sidewalk, or the side of the road. So when you put a sidewalk in, then you have to put in a storm sewer system along with it. So it becomes a little more convoluted unless it's part of a new development.
Well, in the map that you had up, if you go back to that, and right there where you have an existing, there is, and I know that this is not what we're voting on tonight specifically because we don't have a site plan per se, but there is some concern that there are existing streets and roads. The density of Fox Meadows as it exists today, there are many, many, many children. And so to extend the road out of Fox Meadows into this new addition, there is concern from the existing property owners of the increased traffic flow. So could you speak just a little bit about alternative egress into the new development part, that there will be an additional access from, is that Beaver Creek Road?
It is Beaver
Right.
Creek Road.
So the and Mr. Jerome Ballinet is here and probably can speak to some of this as well. But this, and I just took an excerpt of this. This road will wrap along back behind here. So it essentially, that's what I was kind of thinking through that the other day when we were in the work session of exactly what happens here. But his concept and commitment is sidewalks on this section as far as it starts right here, and then anything within this new section that's going to be platted. There is an existing entrance that's on the plat already, so there would be a second access point for Fox Meadows out onto Beaver Creek. It's not been constructed, but it actually is on paper as of right now, and that additional entrance will serve to handle the concern of the existing or the traffic flow out of that development. So there will be two entrances.
2 ins, 2 outs. Mr. Ballinet, would you like to speak?
I have no comments, but certainly more than happy to answer questions.
I will say this, we need rooftops, and we've made that known. We do have a group here tonight from Fox Meadows that have expressed their concern to us about wanting to be sure that there is additional egress and being able to get in and out and to not be overcome with the traffic. And thank you for speaking.
Yeah, more than happy to. Jerome Ballinet, Ardent Development, Bristol, Tennessee. Ms. Powers, to answer your question and to expand a little bit, first of all, the more formal site plan will be brought to Planning Commission May 16th. And there is a second form of ingress egress that is being put in with the first section of this. So there is going to be a second access point off of Beaver Creek. I'm going to say probably a quarter of a mile down the road. And there are, back to the sidewalk issue, this will fall under the subdivision regulations, and we already have sidewalks drawn in, so.
Well, I would just say we see this as a wonderful opportunity to elevate our housing opportunities, our housing constructs. You know, when we go into other cities and other communities, you know, we see sidewalks, we see people out walking a lot, especially with everybody. We're all dog lovers these days. Everybody's got their dog, and lighting for security and the curbing, and you know, it's not a point to try to be difficult. We want to be as accommodating as we can be, but we want to be as progressive in our development as we can be.
Absolutely, I agree.
And to put our best foot forward. Bristol is really on the move right now. We're having a lot of requests for a lot of rezoning, a lot of considerations, and this, that, and the other. And I view it as a collaborative opportunity. We've got someone that's very interested in expanding our housing market, and we are very interested in that. At the same time, we do have folks that are concerned, and I think you've answered the question about the egress, and so.
Thank you.
Laura, did you want to, or John want
Well, no.
to? No, not.
No.
That's not what this is.
I think now's not the time. No, not right now when it comes down to. Yeah.
We've got to get to that point. We're not there yet. We will be though.
Thank you. We're not there yet.
Okay, does any member of council have questions for staff?
Motion to approve 22-6.
Second.
Which is the PRD ordinance, Planned Residential Ordinance.
Correct.
Would any member of council like to discuss ordinance 22-6?
Good thing to offer more options and make things work.
Would anyone in the audience like to address council on this matter?
And this is on the Planned Residential District,
This is
not
on
on.
the PRD,
Yeah,
what we've just discussed.
yes, ma'am.
You
My
need to
name's
state
Darrell.
your
My
name
name's
and
Darrell
address.
Castle. I live in Fox Meadows subdivision. One of the things I'd like to ask you guys and gals to do is when you consider these requests to rezone, we've got single housing families in there, and so if you start putting multi-family houses in there, you're going to really increase the traffic as it is. And this particular developer has another 22 acres that he's requested to be annexed by you guys, and in that one, you could separate it. You can keep Fox Meadows with our two entrances once they put the next one, and he could put a third entrance in for these multi-family houses. And it would reduce our traffic and let us still be a subdivision with single and duplex type houses instead of 6 houses per acre. My math on that would be we could have 138, I guess, more apartments or condos in there. So I just request that you, when we get to the rezoning part, that we leave Fox Meadows as R2, and the part that he's wanting to be annexed, you can do that. And I will tell you, when you throw up the signs that say you want to rezone from R2 to PRD or whatever it is, it upsets the whole neighborhood. We will be more in force May 16th. This one, we sort of snuck up on it. We're already organizing through social media and other ways. So you guys and gals will see us more May the 16th. But just consider how you roll that out into subdivisions. Existing subdivisions
we'd like to see it excluded from the PRD stuff. Okay. Thank you.
In response to that, let everybody know, first of all, the formal site plan will be presented May 16th. There is no multifamily. It's all single-family residential. Density-wise, the current density in the R2 of Fox Meadows is 3.58 per acre. The density increases to 3.97, virtually no difference in density in this development. So I hope that addresses Mr. Castle's concerns.
Okay.
Sure.
I appreciate him saying that, but once that genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. We can stand here and say, well, we're not going to do that, but then once you guys approve it, you ain't got no control over him. Okay. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Young, the site plan will have to come through the planning department and the planning commission before it makes our way back to us, its way back to us, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And so this is there's a little bit of everything with this project. And again, this is the PRD recommendation. So I know we're talking a lot about Fox Meadows and there's the annexation coming up request next. But this is the PRD ordinance that will apply across the city if someone brings forward a PRD project to rezone. What will happen with this project is the annexation process will track forward. There's also, and I'll point it out in just a second, there's a section of R2 city property that is part of Mr. Malinet's project, and he has already requested a rezoning request to rezone the R2 portion to the PRD. That will track through the Planning Commission starting on May 16th, and those are the signs that the neighborhood certainly has seen or is going to see. They're going to get some letters from our department. And that will work its way through Planning Commission back to you all through the rezoning process. But Mr. Malinet did bring by a site plan to submit. He's going to take it to Planning Commission for their concept review. He will also be required to submit a subdivision plat that's approved by the Planning Commission. So there's a lot of moving parts to this project and this process. But we will be happy to talk to the neighborhood and provide a bunch of information for the Planning Commission, of course, on May 16th as well.
And when will the Planning Commission meet?
That's on May 16th.
May 16th.
It's Monday, the third Monday of the month.
Mayor, if I could suggest that we separate the issues of the PRD amendment from the annexation, and comments specific to the PRD would be appropriate now, but not the annexation.
Well, we've got a motion, I think, in a second.
Yes.
Don't we?
I'll call for the vote.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Mary Lee?
Yes.
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 Next item on the agenda is the first reading of Ordinance 22-7, adopting a budget and appropriating funds for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize Ordinance 22-7?
Yes, Mayor, we'll move away from planning topics momentarily then.
And
I'd like to express my appreciation to council. I think you all sat through a 7-hour budget presentation last week, and it is an exhaustive process. But Ordinance 22-7 is considered on first reading this evening for formal adoption of the fiscal 2023 budget and appropriation ordinance for the period beginning July the 1st, 2022. The fiscal 2023 budget does total $137,033,523 and reflects just a little under $3.7 million increase, or 2.8% from the fiscal 2022 budget. The municipal government portion of this sum totals $80,955,071, which is an increase of $10.6 million, or 15.1% from the fiscal 2022 budget. The budget does maintain the current property tax of $1.98 per $100 for $100 of assessed value. And it also maintains the current water and sewer rates, solid waste fees, and stormwater utility fees. The proposed budget follows the key themes of economic development, education, infrastructure, and public safety. It maintains all current city programs and yet makes, and in addition, makes strategic investments in a long-term economic future of our community. Major projects include the continued reconstruction of East Cedar Street, the new construction of a fire station serving East Bristol, construction of sidewalks from Bluff City Highway, along Bluff City Highway from Tennessee High School to Lavender Lane. It also includes a new biosolids handling facility at the Bristol Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, a public-private partnership to develop a pickleball court along Bluff City Highway. In addition, there are trail improvements proposed for a loop trail around Steel Creek Lake at Steel Creek Park. There's a new farmers market proposed in this year's budget, and water system improvements serving the Exit 74 area of Interstate 81. There's also key economic development partnerships. We will continue to be a funding partner for the marketing of Aerospace Park. It also includes the grading of a new 20-acre site in Partnership Part 2 and the development of a new 35-acre rail serve site in Partnership Part 2. The budget includes a 5% across-the-board pay increase for all city employees, and in addition, the employee compensation scale will be adjusted to reflect labor market conditions in our region. The school system portion of the budget totals $56,078,452 and reflects a decrease of $6,942,647, or 11%. This decrease is primarily attributed to reduction in the school capital facility fund as it relates to the completion of the new middle school. If the budget is approved tonight, a public hearing and second reading will be scheduled at your June 7th meeting.
Mr. Sora, did you mention the research and development of a sports complex? Is that included?
That wasn't included in what I read off of my prepared notes, but yes, there is a study. There are dollars included in this that would have a study for a skateboard park as well as an indoor multi-use recreation facility at a site north of Rotary Park.
Thank you. Just checking. You know, I've been on that.
Okay, does any member of council have any other questions for staff on this?
Motion to approve Ordinance 22-7 to adopt a budget and appropriate funds for the fiscal year July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Ordinance 22-7?
We all want to thank our staff for the work, and Tim Beavers, who's retired, and how much work he did, and Holly, your work with your staff, and Mr. Sora, everybody who worked on their own department budgets, et cetera. And there's some very, very exciting things in this budget. There's some exciting things we have to wait for. But that we're preparing. But I want to say that I really appreciate Mary Lee, the employment study, and the attention that we're given to our employees. We ought to do it. We try to do it all the time, but we are finalizing a plan that we had several years ago. Plus, we know in today's economic market and labor market, this is critical that we can keep the best employees, that we can attract the best employees, and we just really appreciate the ability to put that into our budget and to keep moving forward along those lines. That's critical to where we want to be. So, thank you.
The only thing I would say is that because of the efforts of staff, this has been, I think, one of our best budget seasons. It was a long day, but in the past we have had multiple long days, and we can't thank staff enough. They set us up to work through it very well. So a big thank you, and just really appreciate all that you've done.
Okay, Mary Lee, I believe we're ready for a vote.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Yes.
All righty. Off track here.
That's easy.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the second reading of Ordinance 22-2, amending Chapter 2 of the city's zoning ordinance as it relates to special use permits. Staff summarized this issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have a question for staff? Hearing none, is there a motion to take action on this item?
Move to approve ordinance 22-2.
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss 22-2? The public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is the second reading of Ordinance 22-3, amending Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of the city's zoning ordinance as they relate to storage unit facilities. Staff summarized the issue during the public hearing earlier this evening. Does any member of council have questions for staff? Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Move to approve.
Second. Would any member of council like to discuss Ordinance 22-3?
I was just going to say, I know this might not be a process that is used normally, but it is a process that certainly is allowed and follows procedure. And I would say that we know as council that one of our roles is to set the vision for our community. And so I think we're trying to do that with this, and that felt like it was critical to take some action soon. So, but I think it's what kind of community do we want to be? What kind of community do we see ourselves? And I respect that council's acting in good stead to do that. And still following that it'll go to planning commission, different things, and we can also amend some of these later if we need to, et cetera. So
I'd like to see this go back to, for me, I'd like to see it go back to planning of some tweaks that, or whatever needs to be made, at least of where we are now. I guess in the M1 that can happen for the time being, but I'll send it back to planning to look at it, and whatever tweaks need to be made, then make them. But and then I guess I don't see the difference between if we're doing this versus the other. We're making the decision, we'll send it back to planning,
and they can bring some other
and they
things
can bring
forward,
whatever
and we can go
else
through a
comes to us.
process again if we
Well,
need to.
like I said earlier, it still has a pathway for this type of industry if someone comes in and shows desire to put it in the M1 areas.
I think whether we'd gone one way or the other, it's giving us the opportunity for planning to go back, tweak it, bring it back to us, and move forward. I will say this: I did have a call today from a developer that's interested in putting a storage facility in an M1. So, I mean, it's still out there. So, and we appreciate everything that the Planning Commission does do.
Okay. The public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready for a vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Can I confirm who seconded the motion, please?
I did.
Thank you. Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we have a resolution 22-30, adopting a community development block grant and home consortium action plan for fiscal 2023. Staff summarized this matter during the public hearing earlier this evening. So does any member have any questions for staff?
Motion to approve.
Second. And that's ordinance
22-30.
Yeah.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 22-30? Public had an opportunity to comment on this issue during the public hearing, so I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Firewalden,
Yes.
Patton.
Yes.
Next, we have a Resolution 22-31, establishing a public hearing on the proposed annexation of property owned by the Ardent Development Group located adjacent to the Fox Meadows subdivision. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, we've already broached this subject earlier this evening, but this is a request for annexation by Mr. Jerome Maloney with Ardent Development Group. He is the owner of slightly over 22 acres located within the city's urban growth boundary in Sullivan County. This area is located adjacent to the existing residential development of Fox Meadow, which is Fox Meadows subdivision is currently inside the city limits. The purpose for Mr. Maloney's request is to allow the new development, which is adjacent to the existing city limits, to obtain municipal services, including sanitary sewer. The new development does propose, or has a proposed 176 single-family homes and has an anticipated investment of $60 million. The annexation request is preconditioned upon the successful amendment of the planned residential district as it relates to the flexibility of developing the property and the proposed revisions to the city's utility reimbursement agreement, which will be considered later this evening on your agenda. This did go before the Planning Commission at their April 18th meeting and received a favorable recommendation. It was a unanimous vote. The process is a little different than the old annexation by ordinance process. This resolution establishes a public hearing for next month's meeting, as well as the resolution actually voting on the plan of services and the approval of the annexation. Sheriff, would you like to provide some mapping detail if we haven't already gone through those issues? If council has any additional questions.
I'll be very brief and then happy to answer questions. So this is the three parcels that are the subject of the annexation request. So these are contiguous to the existing city limits and the existing Fox Meadows development. Here you can see, actually on this slide, you can see that second access point that will come out right here. So Mr. Maloney's request is just for the annexation of these three parcels, and then there's a portion of this parcel that will be going through that rezoning process. So that is within the city limits right now, and we'll and go through our typical rezoning process. So I don't want to be too brief, but I know that everybody's getting tired. So the request did go to the Planning Commission in April and did receive a favorable recommendation to City Council to start this process.
Okay, any member of council have any questions for staff?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 22-31? Hearing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers,
Yes.
Luttrell,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Firewalden,
Yes.
Patton.
Yes.
Next, we have Resolution 22-32, approving and ratifying private chapter number 44, Senate Bill number 2916, as enacted by the 112th Tennessee General Assembly, amending various provisions of the Charter of the City of Bristol, Tennessee. Mr. Soar, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor, as council's aware, part of your plan of work for this fiscal year was addressing the necessary amendments in the city charter to reflect the change in the voting for city council from odd years in May to even years in November. And as a companion to that necessitated the movement of the selection of mayor and vice mayor during your annual reorganization meeting in July, now to the new council being seated in January. So that was the essence of the amendments, while there were a number of housekeeping measures that went into the amendments to the charter. The key features dealt with the movement of the city council elections, as well as selection of mayor and vice mayor. As Mayor Luttrell read, this was approved by our General Assembly. This was moved through the Senate by Senator Lumberg, and it does require a 2/3 majority of city council vote to formally conclude our amendment process to the city charter.
Motion to approve Resolution 2232.
Second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 2232?
I'm obviously voting for it because it agrees, but I'll just point out, I still am not very happy with November election. I think it's going to be very difficult. I wish we had considered more. We just had an election, which is at the same time we had elections before. If we had changed years, we could accomplish some of the same goals. So anyway, I'm disappointed that we did change to November, but it makes sense to align everything. So I will vote yes, of course.
Okay. Mary Lee, I believe we're ready to vote.
I apologize, who was the second? Thank you. Powers?
Yes.
Luttrell?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Fryerother?
Yes.
Patton?
Yes.
Next, we have Resolution 22-33, amending the residential water and sanitary sewer materials policy. Mr. Sora, would you please summarize this matter for the public?
Yes, Mayor. In October of 2017, City Council approved Resolution 17-116, which established a utility materials policy which provided for developers of residential subdivisions for the city to provide them the necessary piping material, valves, fittings, hydrants, manholes for the extension of water and sanitary sewer service within residential subdivisions. The development community has come back to us and asked, would it be possible to include sewage lift stations, water booster stations, service lines to the meters, and then the bedding envelope. As you're aware, our construction standards require an aggregate being placed in the bedding envelope around our piping material. So to cover those hard costs, as council is aware, we establish a tap fee in those residential areas availing themselves of the materials policy that will be structured to recover the cost of those materials and refund our utility funds, whether it be water or whether it be sanitary sewer. In an effort to promote residential development, and certainly inside the city limits, I think staff sees this as a reasonable request from the development community and recommend support. Will Witcher's with us this evening to further detail the issue if needed. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Sora. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Mr. Sora did a wonderful job of summarizing the revisions to the policy that staff has looked at. I would add just a couple of things. There is a process that has to be obviously gone through before the policy would take effect to any qualifying development. And some of the highlights of those qualifications include the property must be inside corporate limits, must be a major subdivision of 3 lots or more, and existing utilities owned by the city must be available within 200 feet of the development. And just a couple of details regarding the cost. The city will provide, or currently will provide, the cost or the materials themselves, and then the developer would pay the sales tax on the cost of the materials. And as Mr. Sora mentioned, the city would recover the cost through the tap fees. This slide just shows a breakdown of what is covered under the existing agreement or the existing policy. I'm currently water pipe and valve 6 inches or larger, fire hydrants, 8-inch sanitary sewer pipe and larger, and sewer manholes are included. And as we received feedback from the development community, we wanted to look at increasing that scope of what the city would provide under the incentive to include the full envelope of the typical utility services we would provide, which also would include water and sanitary sewer pump stations and then water and sewer service lines, as well as stone backfill for trench excavation, and in addition to water meters as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the proposed amendment to the policy.
Sounds good.
Is there a motion to take action on this item?
Motion to approve Resolution 2233, amending the residential water, sanitary sewer materials policy.
I'll second.
Would any member of council like to discuss Resolution 22-33?
I would just make the comment that this is just another step where we're trying to be developer-friendly, business-friendly. We're trying to encourage people to come into our community to provide us with the rooftops that we so desperately need.
Okay, I believe we're ready to vote. Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers?
Yes.
Luttrell?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
Yes.
This brings us to the consent agenda. Mr. Sore, would you please read the items on tonight's consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, we have the minutes from the April 5th, 2022 City Council meeting, minutes from the April 12th, 2022 City Council call work session, minutes from the April 26th, 2022 City Council work session, Resolution 2234 authorizing entry into an interlocal agreement and mutual aid agreement for the creation and management of the Tennessee District 1 Task Force, and Resolution 2235 awarding a bid for the purchase of a valve insertion system, Resolution 2236 approving an interlocal agreement with the Emergency Communications District of the City of Bristol, Tennessee, Resolution 2237 authorizing payment to Troutman Pepper Hamilton Sanders LLP for legal fees, Resolution 2238 authorizing a purchase of network security monitoring service, and Resolution 2239 awarding proposal for waste tire disposal.
Would any member of council like to have any item removed from the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent
Second.
agenda.
Second.
Margaret was the second.
Mary Lee, please call the roll.
Powers?
Yes.
Luttrell?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
Yes.
This moves us to the Board of Education liaison report. I told you I wouldn't forget you this time.
I'm sure everybody wishes you would have at this point.
Oh, surely not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'll be very brief with my update. We are in our last 3 weeks of our school year. We just completed TN ready testing for early grades last week, and then we've got a little bit of middle school and high school end of course happening this week. We have class night coming up on May 12th, senior walk on May 19th, Tennessee High School graduation May 20th, and TOPS graduation on May 21st. So we've got a busy couple of weeks coming up. This is, in addition to all the weeks you recognized at the beginning of your meeting this evening, we are recognizing Teacher Appreciation Week this week. And we started last year recognizing it really more broadly as staff appreciation, due in large part because of the pandemic. I'm sure you're aware that we've had a much more challenging school year this year than we did last year, if you can believe that. And so we brought back a second year of our staff appreciation, community appreciation extravaganza, as we're calling it. So we've had over 70 prizes donated for our staff, and we've got about 27 different community donors who've contributed to that. So I'd like to publicly acknowledge the support we're receiving from our community again for the second year. That's more than what we had last year when we thought we were in the worst of it. So we are very appreciative of our community for that, for recognizing the work of our folks. I'm excited to announce that we've established the first pre-apprenticeship in manufacturing for our students at Tennessee High School. We are partnering with the Robinette Company, with RCAM and Northeast State Community College, and of course the Tennessee Labor Workforce Development Division at the state level. So we're the first one to do that. If you'll recall, we had the first pre-apprenticeship last year in, was it construction? Can't remember which one we had. It wasn't construction. Was it construction? So we're excited about expanding that. We also have 12 seniors graduating. They'll actually graduate, I think, in about a week from Tusculum University with an associate's degree, and then they'll graduate from Tennessee High School with a high school diploma. And so that's the first cohort of seniors who will have that opportunity. So I just really want to recognize that we have a lot of great opportunities for students in our school district, and it doesn't matter what their goals are for the future. I feel like we're touching on all of that and preparing them for the things that you've recognized this evening, workforce development and those sorts of things. So that's all I have for you, unless you have questions for me.
So, Dr. Tudor, I know you're going to be meeting with us to talk about your budget, but I don't know if there'll be time at that point or a different time. I think Governor Lee just signed into, so if you could, at some point, help us to understand what that means for us and just overall, again.
I can give you a high-level overview when we meet, but we don't have the details of that yet either. But
Right.
yes, I can certainly do. I
great.
can give you our projections.
That'd be great.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. City Manager's report.
Yes, Mayor, along those same lines, as was requested in our budget work session last week, Dr. Tudors has graciously agreed to do the presentation of their fiscal 2023 budget, along with her finance staff as well as members of the Board of Education. We need to finalize that date and time. There's a couple of dates that Monday, May 23rd at 1 p.m., or Tuesday, May 24th at 10 a.m. or 1:30 p.m. I will say that our work session on the 24th is not a heavy agenda, and it might be well to look at that time, since we're going to be gathered. I know we're going to be gathered for an attorney-client meeting on the 24th. So that might be a good time to go ahead and do that. Again, it's a fairly, at least from what I'm seeing at this point, it's a fairly light agenda.
I'd say the 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock or 1:30, either one.
Yeah, either one of those work for me on the 24th.
Do we have a date already, a time with Andrea?
We do not. We do
So
not.
maybe work around her time frame.
Okay.
See what hers is.
And I'll work with Dr. Tudor then to finalize that. So, okay. I would like to express appreciation. We had the BMS spring race on dirt this year. Certainly our police staff, fire, Public Works, Parks and Recreation. It was a long weekend. It was a holiday weekend that they all worked, and I want to express my appreciation to them for the long hours. I know they were on both Saturday night and Sunday night. They were after midnight, breaking up from the track, and then most of them were at work early Monday mornings. Those are truly great troopers that we have on our staff. I'd also like to, speaking of great troopers, I'd like to once again thank council for hanging with us through a very long day last Tuesday, through the budget presentation, and then also Mary Lee Williams and Holly Varan, Krista Bird, and of course former employee Tim Beavers on the budget team that worked to put that together, along with all the city staff that had input in the development of the budget. Thank you.
Okay, council comments.
I just have one if everyone could look at their schedule for next month's meeting. I have to go out of town. I'll leave on the Tuesday, the 7th. If there's any way that we could have our meeting on the 6th, on Monday.
I can accommodate.
So to meet when?
On just the day before Monday.
June 6th, Monday.
I have to leave Tuesday.
And that's for our regular city council meeting?
Yes.
I am hesitant to support that because that's our formal meeting, and to change it at 1 month ahead of time to a different day, I'm just hesitant
Well,
to do
like I
that.
said, it's either, I just said if it's the will of
Right.
so, or I won't be here, so.
I'm going to
I'm
miss
fine.
one in August.
What's the requirement for notification?
Ample public notice, so it's not a specific date, so that would be ample public notice if you all chose to do that at this point.
I'm still good with that, to give plenty of notice, and because we're going to be voting on a lot of important things, second reading, the budget, I think it's important for us to all be here.
And this is just something I can't avoid.
Well, I guess I can bring my August date that I'm going to miss and see if we want to change our August meeting also. So,
I'm good with that date.
yeah, I can do that Monday. That would be fine.
Mark, can you?
It's funny. I just changed my.
Whole calendar and schedule, yeah.
Well, like I said, it's.
No, it's okay. I get it. I can probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not a.
You know,
For me.
I think it's important for you to.
Yeah,
It's tough for me to change it, but it is important. I don't want to be a sticky wicket. I want to be able to work with you.
I think people do arrange their schedules, and it is the August meeting that is, and it's our family beach trip with all of the extended family, and it's something I'm going to do, and I hate to miss. I've rarely missed, but I figured I would miss.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like I said, I can miss too.
I feel like that's better, too, because if we start accommodating our schedules we try to do that some on our work sessions, but if we do it on our formal meeting time, I just feel like it might not be a good idea. Unless we're going to miss 3 or more people. We could if there's any agenda items that are appropriate to delay.
Well, Vance, would you be here on the 13th, or are you still out of town on the 13th?
Yeah.
If it's important to keep it on the 14th, are you in town on the 14th? If it's important to keep it on a Tuesday.
I can't do that
Okay.
Tuesday, so.
Like I said, it's. It's fun.
I just rearranged my schedule today to be here on the 7th. That's why I'm kind of chuckling. So
That's fine.
That's why I'm like, because the 6 would have worked better. About 8 hours ago, the 6 would have worked great.
Did you read the crystal ball?
I couldn't. That's fun.
Well, like I said, this is a pleasure. It's something that's work-related, unavoidable. So, like I said, it's, I'm fine either way. I just wanted to throw it out there that if we can do it, fine. If not, I will not be here.
Well, I'm
So,
good either the 6th or the 7th, and so if we need to have further communication about this, that's fine. I'll just say my comment is, I think the whole situation with planning shows just how vibrant our community is and how hard we are working to move forward. There's nothing more important right now other than our staff's compensation, I will say that, than for us to move forward. Our staff works very hard, and we've looked at the comp study time over time, and we think we have a handle on it right now, but in 6 months, we'll need to look at it again probably. Things are just moving that rapidly, and in trying to keep the quality employees that we have. As far as economic development goes, there's not a better staff for economic development than what we have in Bristol, Tennessee. There isn't a better staff in the upper Northeast Tennessee region any better that can produce any better quality product than what we have in Sullivan County through Sullivan Networks Partnership and the Bristol Planning Department here in Tennessee, Bristol, Tennessee, the economic development, and we work very collaboratively and very well with our surrounding sisters. And I think that we need to be very careful as to being willing to give our voice over to someone who is not directly related to our ongoing development. And I'm speaking about regionalism. I think regionalism is a great thing when it comes to collaboration. I think it can be a great thing in trying to market together in some capacity. But I think that, to be quite honest, we have invested tens of millions of dollars into Bristol proper. We have the most developable land in Northeast Tennessee. We have the greatest infrastructure, thank you to BTES and to our own water department. We have the largest substation that TVA is providing in the region, and we're fixing to have a tremendous rail spur. We're looking at having an additional potential 50 to 60 acres for commercial development, and we've committed $1.7 million to grading a new track. We know that we've got projects in the pipeline, and we've got projects that we're fixing to develop. This has been done through the Bristol, Tennessee Economic Development Department in conjunction with our Planning Department, our Department of Community Relations, and others, along with Sullivan Networks Partnership. We can pick up our phone, our developers can pick up the phone, and the governor does answer our calls. So let there be no mistake that we cannot speak for ourselves and that we do not have the established relationships in Nashville to move our projects forward. Thank you.
I have one. Next week, there's going to be right here an MPO meeting on May 12th at 2 o'clock. And DRPT, which in Virginia, that's the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, is going to give an update from Virginia. So that we want to hear that. That's going to cover rail and our Virginia Breeze bus and all that kind of stuff. Thank you. That's it for me.
Fantastic. I don't really have anything to say, to be honestly. I'm just glad to be here.
It's 10 o'clock.
I'd just like to echo what Councilwoman Powers was saying there. And, what's going on today in this world, that there's a lot of things you can dwell on the negative side. But we have got so much positivity going on here in the city of Bristol, Tennessee. And, we should all be thankful for that. Reflect back when we changed the logo in Bristol, and it said, Bristol is. Now, I remember hearing comments been made, Bristol is moving. Well, we're moving, we're running. So, we're ready to continue that run, and I think we got a lot more to good things to happen. With that,